Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Talk with Walter. I'm a contributor of the Property Tribune, and I'm here today with Sam from LSW Lawyers. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
No problem. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is often talked about within commercial real estate, and that is the security in the lease. And we have bonds, cash bonds, and we have a bank guarantee, and the differences, and both have different benefits. And Sam, let's start right off. What is the main difference, or what are the differences between a cash bond and a bank guarantee?
That's a good question. So look, one of the things that is a major difference is with a cash deposit or cash bond, it's funds that are put into a bank account, either held on trust with a real estate agent or held in trust with a lawyer, or sometimes even held with the landlord, as funds held with them for the security bond or for the obligations of the lease. The other one is a bank guarantee, which is a paper document usually provided by a bank, and that bank effectively secures the funds that are held by the bank for the landlord unconditionally when the landlord holds that piece of paper, which is called a bank guarantee. And effectively, it allows the landlord to exercise their rights over that money that the bank currently holds for the tenant.
Okay, all right. So, what are the benefits for a tenant? And what would they prefer if you're a tenant? Would you prefer to have a cash bond or a bank guarantee, or it doesn't really matter?
If you're a tenant, you'd probably prefer to have a cash bond in some sense, as you would have some securities over it if you did go into bankruptcy or liquidation at any point in the future, because there is the ability to dispute whether the landlord has the right to that security deposit or not, depending on whether it's an asset. And that's an argument that the liquidator will put or receiver would put in the event that a tenant does go in bankruptcy. It's also easier for a tenant to just simply transfer funds over to a landlord rather than having to go to a bank, organize a bank guarantee, which costs a small amount of money to organize, but you have to go through and make sure it's all correct, all the wording satisfactory for the landlord. It's a bit of a longer process and can sometimes take a bit of time to be held up with a bank before it's released.
So it's a bank guarantee is a bit more complicated for the tenant to organize.
Yes.
If you put yourself in an owner's position, would an owner prefer a cash bond because it's easy, it's straight there, or would they prefer a bank guarantee because of the liquidation point of view that you just mentioned?
A bank guarantee would be the preference, being because of the fact that you would have certain rights if it does come to liquidation or bankruptcy in the future. It's the same value as a security deposit. You have an unconditional right to the funds that are placed in a bank guarantee, subject to the wording that's written in that bank guarantee. However, it's something that you hold, you'll have a better interest in it in the event that there's liquidation or receivership that happens. And it's effectively a stronger right over funds that are held by a bank.
Okay, all right. So basically, until the landlord releases the bank guarantee, it's their money.
Correct. As long as they hold those funds or they hold that piece of paper, they basically have security over those funds. Sometimes a bank guarantee will have an expiry date, at other times it won't. So it's important that you negotiate and ensure that any bank guarantee that's given to you, if you are a landlord, doesn't have an expiry date. Sometimes tenants will negotiate for it to expire 6 months after the end of the term or a further option term, but that's obviously negotiable terms that happen between parties.
Yeah, we've seen a few times where a bank guarantee would expire on the exact date when the lease comes to an end, which is exactly the moment when you want to draw upon it if there is a dispute. And then tenant walks off and the security is not worth anything anymore. So that is indeed a very good one to make sure that you at least have that little bit of lead up time after a term expires, so that you have time to either draw upon it or renegotiate a renewal of that bank guarantee.
Correct. And sometimes some people don't consider the option when they get the expiry date of the bank guarantee. So then you have a tenant who exercises an option, and sometimes they roll into that option period and they're left with a period where they don't have any security for the updated bank guarantee, or at least at the start of it. So if there's a default in that period, you're not covered. So it's either important to make sure the bank guarantee goes all the way to the end of the option period, and also covers the total amount of increases if it happens over years of the tenancy.
Okay, all right, perfect. Now, is there anything else that landlords and or tenants would need to take in consideration when it comes to the security of the lease in place?
Not necessarily. I mean, the main thing is the wording of the lease when it's being drafted by both landlord and tenant. And depending on, if you're a tenant, you'd obviously want a bank guarantee that expires at a shorter period straight after the lease, so it's not held back by the landlord for a long period of time. But then on the other end, if you're the landlord, you want to make sure that it's there for as long as possible and covers the higher amount of rent. So a bank guarantee is normally given at the start of a lease. It's a difficult document to change, and a tenant doesn't want to change it every year. So normally what you'd want to do is make sure that you're covered for the higher or increased amount of rent before you go ahead and finalize that bank guarantee. So either get an average of the rent across the term, or get the highest level of rent that it would be across the term, to make sure that you're covered for the maximum period. If you're a tenant, it doesn't matter either way. You'd obviously want a lower amount if that's the case, and you wanted to make sure it expires as quickly after, so you can get your money back after a lease ends.
So if a tenant provides a bank guarantee, they don't actually have to give cash, but do they financially feel it, or it's just a fee to get the bank guarantee and
There's a
that's
fee, and sometimes some banks hold it back, other banks don't. Depends on financial circumstances and assets and so on and so forth. So it's
the situation is different.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
All right. Well, that's interesting for you to share a bit of light on that for us. What I'll do is I'll write an article about this, and I'll share this video with the broader communities as well. If then someone out there has a question for Sam and wants to know if how the situation applies to your particular situation, I'm happy to facilitate an introduction and see if he's able to have a look at your particular situation and can help you out. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.